I wanted to talk to you about something that is dear to my heart, and it's a type of teaching that I was heavily involved in around 2011, and then kind of slipped away from it, slipped back from it. And the reason being is because I was going back into the more fundamental practices of meditation, namely concentration and insight meditation. And I was quite happy doing that. Most recently, we started doing an 8-week course in the area of emptiness, some of the deeper teachings of Buddhism. And people are really enjoying the classes. One of the things that has been coming up, and I'd like to kind of clarify right now, and kind of as a teacher's tool, there's I've been doing these teacher's tips, and this is one of the teacher's tips in the area of what we could call some of the higher teachings. Some people call them deeper teachings because there's a deeper understanding is needed for them. But I want to try to address the idea of emptiness, non-duality, non-self, as opposed to self-realization, these types of things, and how they relate to the outcome that we're looking for, which is fundamentally we're looking for freedom or liberation from our suffering. And a lot of it has to do with the words. And I know that in Buddhism, the first thing that trips people up, as far as being a Buddhist and understanding the terminology of Buddhism, the first thing that really trips people up is the idea of what consciousness is. And I know this was a sticking point for me, kind of, because consciousness from the Buddhist standpoint is the sense organ, the eyes or ears or nose or mouth or touch or whatever it might be. The sense organ goes out, seemingly out into the world, makes contact with these sense objects, and then that is a moment of consciousness. That is the particularly the Theravada Buddhists look at what consciousness is. And when we get into, or when we look at other people's ideas or perspectives of what they feel they are beyond just an ordinary self, a lot of times they say that we are consciousness. We are consciousness itself. Sometimes people will use the word presence, we are the presence, or we are this still awareness. We are awareness. And so there's different terms, different words that we use for these things. I have a tendency to use the word presence when we are very much kind of in the pocket, so to speak. We're not worried, when we're meditating, we're not worried about the past or the future. They have they're just not coming up in the mind, what happened in the past or fixing the future. None of that is going on. We're just very, very present. And we might even be focusing on presence or awareness itself, but usually we're using a meditation object. It could be even the breath. We're focusing on that, and we're in this area of presence. Sometimes people will say that's pure consciousness, and that's fine, if people want to use those terms. But again, from the Buddhist perspective, we could say that's not consciousness. Consciousness is when the sense organ comes into contact with the sense object, and there's a moment of consciousness. Consciousness is, it's like it's happening all the time, this moment after moment after moment, and there's nothing we can do about it. So that is a type of consciousness. That is consciousness. But when we look at and hear people say that we are consciousness, and I've heard it explained that consciousness is this aliveness that we are. It never changes, and it's in everything. Everything has this consciousness. And whether we are in this body or not, there is still this consciousness. So I just want to explore that a moment here. The ultimate teaching and the ultimate truth of Buddhist teachings is emptiness, that all phenomena is empty. And there's different ways to look at that, but initially, or most certainly, people would agree that when they get that realization of emptiness, that things aren't empty from a standpoint of there's no individual existence. So everything is empty of individual existence. Nothing can stand on its own. Everything is made out of different parts, like parts of a car. My parents, my mother and father came together and created me. I just didn't happen to be here. There's different situations, causes and conditions that came together for this to happen. So from that standpoint, this emptiness coincides with this idea of that we are consciousness, particularly when we say that we are consciousness and everything out there is consciousness. It's a little bit different way to describe the Buddhist idea of consciousness, but in many ways it's the same. If we are consciousness and everything out there is consciousness, if we were out there looking at us, it would be exactly the same as if we are out there we are here looking out. So consciousness is everywhere, which means that there is no duality, which is very, very important. In emptiness, there is no separation. In non-duality, there is no separation. There is the lack of self in Buddhism, and in Advaita Vedanta, there is the self-realization, but that realization of the self is realization that the self is actually empty of individual existence. And so these two truths are exactly the same. And there's an agreement there. And of course there has to be one person that is awake or enlightened in the Buddhist tradition and somebody that is awake from the Hindu or Christian tradition. The awakening or the enlightenment is exactly the same. It's not that one person is more enlightened than the other because they have different terminology or different words that they use for these different things. So again, the consciousness that we are seeing out there and the consciousness that is out there is the same, so it's empty. It's considered empty of individual existence. And so, again, these two coincide. Now, when we are looking out and we are saying something such as somebody cuts us off in traffic, when we go that SOB just cut me off. So we have this consciousness that goes out to that other form of consciousness, and it's a reflection back at us. And that is the exact same meaning behind karma. So karma is directly related to all this as well. Karma is a reflection something that we put out and it comes back and somehow affects this consciousness. It could be good karma or it could be bad karma. And it's very, very subtle. We don't know the different results of what is being put out there in the form of consciousness and what is coming back. But it helps to see that all consciousness is the same, and so that these teachings are all the same. If we want to wake up, to the fact that we can be free in this moment, this is really the key. To be free in this moment means that we are not looking for something out there. We're not seeking for something out there to bring happiness within us. We can't find it. We can't possibly find it. Because out there is us. As long as there's this agreement rather than this dichotomy of me and that, everything is full and everything is rich and flowing. Everything is shared. Everything is the same. And more importantly, the grasping and clinging for objects in the exterior to make us feel complete is no longer. It doesn't last. And I hope this helps. A lot of it has to do with the terminologies that we use, whether it's consciousness or presence or awareness or whatever it might be. And it has a great deal to do with our interpretation of what consciousness is, what our interpretation of what awareness is, and all of these things. But they are the same. And again, if we would talk to a room full of awakened people, they would have all the same agreement. The terminology still might be different, but at the end I'm sure they would go, oh yeah. Well, turns out that we all mean the same thing after all. I hope this helps. If there's any questions you have, maybe write them down and I can correspond with you a little bit. And I hope this will help clear up some things for you. Thank you so much.